Hello, everyone. In the beginning of Perek Kol Nochalin in Bava Batra, page 110, the Gemara, apropos discussing the relationship between kids and their children, kids and their parents, and the sons that look like the brothers of the mother, and what do kids inherit from their parents? The Gemara mentions one of the most curious, enigmatic verses that we have in Nevi'im Rishonim, in Sefer Shoftim, with an amazing comment about that story. Let me share and let's read it. So, in order to understand the Gemara, first let me tell a little bit about chapter 18 in Sefer Shoftim. Chapter 18 of Sefer Shoftim is telling us about the fact that Shevet Dan was not able to inherit their property, their original Nachala in the area of what's today in Israel is Gush Dan. So they immigrated up north and they stayed there. After a while, they wanted to have their own temple, and they start and Micha, one of the people in Shevet Dan, built an idol, a pesel. And then they was thinking to themselves that they should have a kohen to help them worship the avodah zarah. And the entire perek, you see here that I'm going to read you verse 30, Lamed. But the entire perek is talking about this Levite who came up to the tribe of Dan, telling them that he and his kids can be the priests. Only at the end of this chapter does the Navi tell us that this Levite, who became a priest, a Kohen, not appropriately, because only the children of Aharon can be Kohanim, that Levite, his name is Yehonatan ben Gershom ben, and please look at the word Menashe here, that the noon is little and it's hiding between the mem and the shin. And the understanding of most of our commentators is that it was too embarrassing to say that this Yehonatan ben Gershom, as we know the name of one of the sons of Moshe, became Oved Avodah Zarah, idol worshiper. And not only that, he became a priest, even though he's not from priest family, he's just a simple Levite. So in order for not embarrassing Moshe, they added a little nun between the mem and the shin that sounds like Menashe. And it only appears at the end of this chapter. So knowing all of that, our Gemara is telling us a beautiful discussion here. And they turn aside there and said to him, these are the people of Dan talking to Yonatan ben Gershom ben Moshe, who brought you here? And they're turning to him and it's like, where are you from? Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? And what do you have here? In other words, they're so surprised that these Levite come all the way up in their idol worshiping territory and wanting to become a priest. And Chazal look at their question at one pasuk. It's Judges 18 verse 3, and then look at this pasuk and they say, "Wow, every word here is reminding us of something about that appears verses that appears about Moshe." They say to him, "Do you not come from Moshe?" Wait a second. What do you mean you want to be our priest? And you want to be a priest for Avodah Zarah? Aren't you the grandchild of Moshe Rabbeinu? Do you not come from Moshe, about whom it is written, do not draw close to here, al tikrav halom, okay? And you see here in the English, it's the same word, halom, that they use for this person. Okay? Who brought you halom? And God turned to Moshe and says, al tikrav halom. And also they tell him, do you not come from Moses, about whom it is written, what is that in your hand? And ma ze beyadecha. And that's exactly how they talk to him in Shoftim. They say, what, ma are you doing? Ma beyadecha, ma taoseh. And do you not come from Moshe, about whom it is written, but as for you, stand here with me, stand here, amod po. And they also ask that Levite person, what do you have here? What do you have po? So what the Gemara is doing so beautifully, they take the question of the children of Dan, talking to that Levite who is a descendant of Moshe Rabbeinu, using the same words that God is using to Moshe, trying maybe to embarrass that Levite, so he will not continue with his plan to become a priest. They are embarrassed for him, and they are surprised. No, Mele, they are just such a Vedan, and Micha did the pesel, but the grandchild of Moshe Rabbeinu is coming to worship, to be a priest of Avodah Zarah. And so it's a shock for them. And after they ask him, shall you, a descendant of Moshe, become a priest for idol worship? Can the Gemara puts more words in their mouth? Like these are the hidden hints, but the Gemara adds and say, the apparent question, you, the descendant of Moshe, become a priest of idol worship? How can that be? So Yonatan said to them, this is the tradition that I received from the house of my father's father. This is what Saba taught me. This is my grandfather taught me. A person should always hire himself even to idol worship and not require the help of people by receiving charity. לעולם ייתן אדם עצמו לעבודה זרה ולא יצטרך לבריות. In other words, he says, I have priorities for my grandfather who taught us that don't take charity if you have no parnasa, if you have no way to provide for your household. You can also go work for idol worshiping. And of course, this is an intriguing conversation. This is a made-up conversation that the Gemara is saying, but the Gemara cannot be happy with that answer, saying that, yeah, my grandfather Moshe said it's okay to work Avodah Zarah because I don't have to provide for my family. And that's why the Gemara comments, and he, Yonatan, thought that this referred to actual idol worship, like literally idol worshiping. But this is not so. He misunderstood his grandfather. Rather, here the term idol worship literally means strange service, in referring to every labor. Avodah labor, zarat, different, change. What does it mean, strange? Strange for you. In other words, this is explanation. One should be willing to perform labor that is difficult and humiliating in his eyes rather than become a recipient of charity. So let's read the end and I'll conclude. And as Rav said to Rav Kahana, and Amoraim in Bavel, Rav said to Rav Kahana, his student, skin a carcass in the market and take payment, but do not say, I am a great man and this matter is beneath me. In other words, Rav is quoting in the name of his teacher. Rav Kahana is quoting in the name of his teacher that said, do even the ugliest, most humiliating work of skinning the skin from an animal in the middle of the market, and never say, I'm too important. I'm too important to do something. This is beneath me. So what we have here is like starting with the idea of Avodah Zarah, literally Avodah Zarah. We move into, but I have to do it because I have no way to provide for myself. To what the Gemara is doing, what the Gemara is saying is like, it's obviously not literally Avodah Zarah. It means avodah which is not, which is beneath you. And the message is, if you have no way to provide to your family, if you have no way of parnasah, if you need money, every job will respect you, because providing for your family is more important than your honor, if we read the end. And what we see happening in the parshanut of Rishonim is fascinating. For example, Hameiri, Rabbi Menachem Hameiri, who lived in France at the 14th century. And Hameiri is saying, however, it is proper for a person to not reduce himself by taking charity. And even if he's extremely poor, it is proper for him to hide his poverty and reduce his substance until he does not reduce himself to a job that is not worthy of him. Okay, in other words, Meiri is saying, I'm putting a limit to what Chachamim said in our Gemara. Obviously, you should respect yourself. You should not do something that is beneath you. And it's even better, again, that you'll be a little bit poor, but not go out to work something which is not appropriate for you. However, says Hameiri, if he becomes very, very poor and people know it, people already know that this person is very poor and it's a known thing, then he should find himself a job that is not appropriate for him. But we see that for the Meiri, the point is that, as long as you can hide it from people, you should just just use a little bit for your survival. But if everyone knows it, then there's no reason to hide it. And then do if everyone knows about it, it means that it's really serious. And then you can find yourself a job that is not appropriate for you. The Rashbam, Rabbi Shmuel ben Meir, the grandchild of Rashi, is saying that when Yonatan, as we saw in the Gemara, that Yonatan, the grandchild, said, Saba taught us that we can even work in idol worshiping in order to bring parnasah and not to rely on people. So the Rashbam is making sure that we will understand that in no case Moshe said such thing, and what he meant was, let him rent himself out, except that in his heart will not be like this. In other words, you can, if you need, work in a house of avodah zarah, but don't forget in your heart that your heart belongs to God, that you do not believe in avodah zarah. And nevertheless, says Rashbam, avodah shehi zara lo, that it is foreign to him. What does that mean? Avodah shehi zara lo. He is important, and the job is despised and ugly, but there is no prohibition in it. In other words, Rashbam is saying, maybe people will say it's not a respectful thing for a Talmid Chacham to work in a despised work. And he says, no, if this is what you need, if you need it in order to provide for your family, it's not forbidden, even for a Talmid Chacham, to work in a job which is ugly, which is despise him, if you want to say. And the Rambam in Hilchot Matnot Aniyim, he writes this halacha in the halachot of giving tzedakah, Hilchot Aniyim, the laws of giving money to the poor. And the Rambam says a person should always construct himself and bear hardship rather than appeal to people at large and make himself a burden on the community. It's a different point of view. It's a different view than what we saw in the Meiri before. For the Rambam, for someone to be a burden on the community, for the community to sustain a person, to give them money because they're not working, and they just live out of charity, this is a forbidden thing. And he's saying very harsh words. And a person should always construct himself and bear hardship rather than appeal to people at large and make himself a burden on the community. Our sages commanded, saying, Make your Shabbat as weekdays, and do not appeal to people at large. In other words, if you don't have what to eat for Shabbat except for some bread and water, it's better to do that, to make your Shabbat simple as every day, rather to go out and beg people for charity, beg people to give you food. Even a distinguished sage who becomes poor should involve himself in a profession. Okay, don't say, "Oh, I am a Talmid Chacham. I'm an important person. I'm sitting in yeshiva and learning all day. So please provide for me." Says a Rambam, even a distinguished sage who becomes poor should involve himself in a profession, even in a degrading one, rather than appeal to people at large. It is preferable for a person to skin the hide of animal carcasses, that we saw it in the Gemara, rather than tell people, "I am great. I'm a great sage. I'm an important person. Please give me money, give me food." Or "I am a priest," and I've no doubt that the Rambam here is hinting to our story. And "I am a priest, grant me sustenance." And our sages commanded conducting oneself in such a manner. They commanded conducting oneself in such a manner. And there were great sages who were. And then the Rambam says, look, we need to learn from Chachamim. There were sages who were wood choppers, porters of beam, water carrier for gardens, and iron smelters, and makers of charcoal, but they did not ask anything from the community, nor did they accept gifts that were given to them. And this is the ideal behavior that the Rambam is expecting from us. And Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Karo, is following the instructions of the Rambam, and he's saying the same thing. Let me just read the end. And even though he becomes scholarly and respectable, let him engage in some occupation. Like the words of the Shulchan Aruch are a little bit softer than the Rambam, but he said, even though he's scholarly and respectable, let him engage in some occupation. Don't lean and be dependent completely in other people, even an unpleasant occupation, so as not to need the help of people. And we will conclude with Mesilat Yesharim, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, at the 18th century, that is teaching us the larger lesson. And he says, however, our sages of less memory, who always instructed us and guided us on the path of truth, said, love work and hate Rabbanut. Okay, this is how he concludes it. Love work. It's not a bad thing to work for yourself, to work for Parnassah. This is how God created the world. You should hate the Rabbanut, you should hate the job that you give money without working, or you think that you're being an important person entitled you to accept gifts from other people. And further, and more so, says Baal Mesilat Yesharim, flay carcasses in the marketplace and earn wages, and do not say, I am an important man, I am a Kohen, and it is beneath my dignity. And further, one should always hire himself out to work which is strange to him, rather than be dependent on others. And what Mesilat Yesharim is doing, what the Ramchal is doing here, is beautifully taking the sentence that Yehonatan, the grandson of Moshe, said, and the sentence that Chachamim said, and he combines them. Okay, one should always hire himself out to work which is strange to him, avodah shehi zara lo, rather than be dependent on others. And he concludes that with taking our sugya and making it one, both, yes, don't think it's beneath you to work in a work which is strange, or rather not in your kavod, not in your dignity, rather than depend on others. In other words, work for yourself, provide for your family, and don't depend on other people when you can use all the talents that God gave you.